The ship called New Hope was supposed to be safe. Captain Jiho had checked all the routes 3 times before they left Earth. The vessel carried families, children, teachers, doctors, and engineers. They were going to build a new home on Terran 5, a peaceful world far from the crowded cities of Earth. 847 people traveled together, dreaming of fresh starts and open skies. Ambassador Minha sat in the common room with her 2 daughters, Nari and Hana. They were drawing pictures of what their new house would look like. Her husband Daehyun was reading a book nearby, occasionally looking up to smile at his family. In just 3 more days, they would arrive at their destination. Everything felt perfect. Then the alarm started screaming. Captain Jiho ran to the bridge. The screen showed 5 ships approaching fast. They were Vrak mercenary vessels, heavily armed and moving with clear hostile intent. Jiho immediately opened communication channels and broadcast that they were an unarmed civilian ship. He sent their registration codes. He explained they carried only families and children. The Vrak ships did not respond. They simply opened fire. The first blast tore through the engine section. The second hit the living quarters where families were sleeping. Jiho screamed orders to evacuate, but there was so little time. Parents grabbed their children and ran for the escape pods. Teachers tried to keep students calm while moving them to safety. The ship shook with every hit, and the lights flickered as systems failed. Mina held her daughters tight as they ran through smoking corridors. Daehyun was ahead, leading them toward Pod Bay 3. An explosion behind them threw them forward. When Minha looked back, Daehyun was gone. She screamed his name, but there was only fire and twisted metal. Nari and Hana were crying, and Minha had to keep moving. She had to save her daughters. They never reached the pod bay. Another explosion tore through that section. The last thing Minha saw was her daughters' faces. 18 minutes after the attack began, the New Hope broke apart. 47 people made it to escape pods. 800 people did not. A passing merchant ship picked up the survivors 6 hours later. They floated in space, watching pieces of their destroyed home drift away, along with everyone they loved. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representative Kyungmin stood before thousands of alien diplomats and presented the evidence. He showed them the recordings from the New Hope. He played the distress calls. He displayed images of the destroyed ship and the bodies floating in space. 312 of the dead were children. The council listened politely. Then they began their standard procedures. They would form an investigation committee, they said. This would take time, perhaps 5 to 7 years. They would study the evidence carefully. They would consider compensation options. They would arrange mediation sessions between humanity and the Hegemony Corporation, which had hired the mercenaries. They spoke about treaties and protocols and proper channels. The Vrak delegation stood and claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Their mercenaries had thought the New Hope was smuggling weapons. They expressed regret for the error. They offered to review their identification procedures. Fleet Admiral Hyunwoo sat in the human section of the council chambers. He was a military man who had served Earth for 40 years. He had fought in wars and made peace treaties. He understood politics and diplomacy. But as he listened to aliens talk about committees and investigation timelines while 800 human bodies floated in space, something cold settled in his chest. The council session lasted 6 hours. At the end, they voted to create the investigation committee and schedule the first mediation session for 8 months in the future. They warned humanity not to take any independent action. Such actions would violate the Concordat of Stars and result in severe consequences for Earth's membership in the galactic community. Hyunwoo returned to the human embassy. His aide, Commander Soman, followed him into his office. She had never seen the Admiral look so angry. His hands were shaking as he opened a secure communication line to Earth. His message was brief. They killed our children and want to form committees about it. Request permission to handle this ourselves. On Earth, President Sang-hoon received the message at 3 in the morning. He immediately called General Young-soo and the military council. They met in the secure room beneath the Capitol building. For 2 hours, they reviewed the evidence from New Hope. They read the council's response. They discussed the consequences of what they were considering. Then they voted. It was unanimous. General Young-soo sent the coded reply to Admiral Hyunwoo. 3 words: permission granted. Act. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council 23 years ago. They had followed the rules carefully. They had been peaceful, diplomatic, and patient. They had believed in the system. But now their children were dead, and the system wanted to talk about it for 7 years. The talking was over. The galaxy believed humans were peaceful traders who followed every rule. They had seen human merchant ships carrying goods between the stars. They had watched human diplomats bow politely in council meetings. They thought they knew what humanity was. They were wrong. Deep in the outer solar system, far beyond where commercial traffic traveled, Admiral Hyunwoo activated the Shadow Fleet. These ships had been built in secret over 15 years. While Earth sent peaceful greetings to the Council, military engineers had been preparing for the possibility that the galaxy might not be as civilized as it claimed. 47 warships powered up their engines for the first time. They were not like Council vessels that prioritized comfort and efficiency. These were weapons built for one purpose: to destroy anyone who threatened human lives. The lead ship was called Righteous Fury, commanded by Captain Taejin. Taejin had lost his younger brother on the New Hope. His brother had been a teacher, taking children to see the stars. Now Taejin would make sure those deaths meant something. He stood on his bridge and watched his crew prepare. Every single person there had volunteered. Every single person understood what they were about to do. Lieutenant Subin ran the electronic warfare systems. She was only 23 years old, but she could break into alien computer networks like they were children's toys. The Council had outdated security because no one had challenged them in centuries. Subin had studied their systems for 3 years. She knew exactly how to shut them down. Colonel Min-seok commanded the Marines. His soldiers had trained for years in secret, practicing how to fight in alien environments and against alien physiology. They had studied captured weapons and armor. They knew how the Vrak fought, how they moved, how they thought. Min-seok had made his Marines watch the recordings from New Hope. He wanted them to remember why they trained so hard. Chief Engineer Ji-won had modified every ship's engines. She had pushed them beyond what should have been possible, squeezing out more power at the cost of the engines burning out faster. It did not matter. These ships were not built to last decades. They were built to deliver justice, and they only needed to survive one battle. Intelligence Officer Yoonji had been tracking the Vrak mercenaries since the attack. She had contacts across the galaxy, people who traded information for money or favors. It took her 11 days to locate the mercenary fleet. They were at Brekor Station, a lawless place in neutral space where criminals bought weapons and spent their stolen money. The station was owned by Gwangsu, a human who had left Earth 30 years ago to make his fortune selling weapons. Yoonji contacted him with a simple message: "Help us find the mercenaries, or we will remember that you helped them hide." Gwangsu was a businessman. He understood threats. He sent Yoonji everything she needed: station layouts, security codes, and the exact location of every Vrak ship. The Galactic Council was not completely blind. They noticed human military movements. Ambassador Kyungmin received visitors every day. Council members warned him about consequences. They spoke of trade embargoes and diplomatic isolation. Some threatened war if humanity acted without council approval. Kyungmin listened politely to each threat. He offered tea. He nodded at the right moments. But he said nothing of substance. His job now was not to make peace. His job was to keep the council talking while the fleet moved into position. Every day he delayed them was another day for the ships to travel. At night, alone in his quarters, Kyungmin recorded messages to his daughter June back on Earth. He told her he was proud to serve in this moment. He told her that sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting that people would call you wrong. He told her that protecting the innocent was more important than being liked. The fleet gathered at the edge of human space. Admiral Hyunwoo inspected each ship personally. He spoke to the crews. He looked into their eyes and saw the same cold determination he felt himself. These were not soldiers seeking glory. They were people who had watched children die and been told to wait for committees to investigate. The night before departure, Hyunwoo addressed the entire fleet. His face appeared on every screen in every ship. He spoke clearly and without emotion. He told them about the 47 survivors from New Hope who had watched their families burn. He told them about the Council's offer of a 7-year investigation. He told them what they were about to do and why it mattered. When he finished, there was no cheering. The crews simply returned to their stations and prepared. They understood the weight of what they carried. This was not about revenge, though that was part of it. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. A message that would be written in fire and steel. Humanity would protect its children. Anyone who harmed them would face consequences, not committees. The days of talking were over. Captain Taijin gave the order from the bridge of righteous fury. All ships reported ready. Engines hummed with power. Weapon systems showed green across the board. Lieutenant Subin had the coordinates locked in. Colonel Minsuk's Marines were suited and armed. Every person on every ship knew their role. The fleet jumped to hyperspace together, 47 ships moving as one. Their destination was Brekor Station. Their mission was simple: find the murderers who killed 800 people. Make them pay. Show the galaxy what happens when you attack humans and hide behind bureaucracy. The journey would take 3 days. In that time, the crews prepared. They checked weapons. They reviewed plans. They thought about the families who died and the justice that had been denied. They thought about what they were about to become. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humans. They were capable of great kindness and great violence. They preferred peace, but would bring war when necessary. They followed rules until those rules protected murderers. And they never ever forgot their dead. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Brekor system. 47 warships appeared where empty space had been moments before. On every bridge, crews moved with quiet efficiency. There was no excitement, no battle cries. Just cold professional focus. Brekor Station's sensors detected them immediately. Station Master Guangsu was ready. He activated the station-wide communication system and announced routine maintenance on the detection grid. Technical difficulties, he said. Nothing to worry about. The message kept anyone from noticing the approaching warships until it was too late. The Vrock mercenaries were scattered throughout the station. Some drank in bars, celebrating their successful raid on New Hope. Others gambled away their payment in the station's casinos. A few slept in their quarters, dreaming of their next job. None of them expected consequences. In their experience, the Galactic Council talked but never acted. Captain Taijin stood on the bridge of righteous fury and watched the distance close. His tactical display showed 14 Vrock ships docked at the station. Intelligence Officer Yunji had marked each one. Every ship had participated in the New Hope attack. Every captain had given the order to fire on civilians. Every crew member had pulled the trigger. Lieutenant Subin worked at her console, fingers dancing across controls. She sent electronic attacks into the Vrock ship systems. Their computers were old and poorly protected. Within seconds, she had control. Engine systems locked. Weapon systems went offline. The Vrock ships became floating metal coffins before their crews even knew humans were there. Finally, someone on the station noticed the approaching fleet. An alarm screamed through the corridors. The Vrock mercenaries ran for their ships. They pounded on locked doors and found dead systems. Some tried to restart their engines manually. They never got the chance. The human fleet opened fire. The weapons the humans used had never been seen before in galactic space. Particle beams operating at frequencies that bypassed standard shields. Railguns firing projectiles at speeds that turned metal into plasma. Every shot was precisely calculated. Every target was carefully chosen. The Vrock ships exploded one by one. 3 Vrock vessels managed to launch from the station. Their captains were skilled and desperate. They activated emergency engines and tried to run, but human warships were faster. The chase lasted 90 seconds. Then those ships joined the others as expanding clouds of debris. The space battle took 23 minutes. When it ended, 14 Vrock mercenary ships were destroyed. Not a single vessel escaped. Not a single human ship was damaged. The galaxy had never seen such one-sided destruction. But the mission was not complete. Colonel Minsuk stood in the troop bay of the assault shuttle, surrounded by 200 Marines. They wore black armor marked only with small Earth flags. Each soldier carried weapons designed specifically for this mission. They had trained for 3 years for this moment. The shuttles punched through the damaged docking rings of Brekor Station. Metal screamed as the human ships forced their way inside. Marines poured out before the shuttles fully stopped. They moved in practiced formations, weapons ready, scanning for targets. Station civilians heard the announcement in multiple languages. Stay in your quarters. Lock your doors. This does not concern you. Anyone who interferes will be treated as hostile. The civilians, terrified and confused, obeyed. They had heard stories about humans. Now they understood the stories were real. The Vrak mercenaries tried to organize a defense. They were warriors, trained and experienced. But they had spent their careers attacking defenseless merchants and civilian ships. They had never fought real soldiers before. The Marines moved through the station like death itself. They had names and faces of every Vrak who participated in the New Hope massacre. Intelligence Officer Yunji had provided detailed information. Which ones fired first? Which ones killed children trying to escape? Which ones laughed about it afterward in station bars? Room by room, corridor by corridor, the humans hunted. Some Vrak fought. They died fighting. Others tried to surrender. The Marines checked their names against the list. If they had killed civilians on New Hope, surrender was not accepted. The station echoed with weapons fire for 4 hours. When silence finally fell, Colonel Minseok reported to Admiral Hyunwoo. 93 Vrak mercenaries eliminated. 0 Marines lost. 3 station security guards who tried to interfere were wounded, but would survive. No civilian casualties. The mission was complete. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of righteous fury and activated every communication frequency used by the Galactic Council. His message would reach every species, every government, every ship in Council space. He wanted no confusion about what had happened or why. His face appeared on screens across the galaxy. He spoke in clear, simple words. Humanity had delivered justice for the New Hope massacre. The mercenaries who killed 800 civilians, including 300 children, had been found and dealt with. The Galactic Council had offered committees and investigations. Humanity had chosen a different path. Hyunwoo's message was direct. Any person or group that attacks human civilians can expect the same response. Humanity will not negotiate with murderers. Humanity will not wait for committees. Humanity will find you and humanity will make you pay. This is not a threat. This is a promise. The transmission included complete video records from the New Hope attack. The galaxy could see exactly what the Vrak had done. The children crying as they ran, the families trying to reach escape pods, the mercenaries firing again and again into a defenseless ship. No one who watched could claim this was justice denied. It was justice delayed. Now justice delivered. Then Admiral Hyunwoo gave the order. The fleet would return to human space immediately. They left Brekor Station functioning. They left civilians unharmed. They left a very clear message in their wake. The galaxy had been alerted. Humans were no longer the peaceful merchants who bowed in council meetings. They were something far more dangerous. They were parents who had lost their children and would burn down the stars to avenge them. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from 47 species shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up. Some aliens demanded war against humanity. Others called for immediate sanctions. A few sat in stunned silence. Ambassador Kyung-min stood at the human delegation podium. Around him, the chamber looked like a storm. But he remained perfectly calm. He had expected this reaction. He was prepared for it. The Vrak delegation was led by Warlord Hakor. His whole body shook with rage as he demanded immediate military action against Earth. The humans had committed an act of war, he declared. They had murdered Vrak citizens in neutral space. This violation of the Concordat could not stand. The Lumerians spoke next. They were tall, peaceful beings who had maintained galactic peace for 3 centuries. Their representative spoke with deep sadness. Violence was never the answer, they said. Humanity had chosen darkness over light. The Council must respond firmly to preserve order. Species after species stood to condemn human actions. They spoke of broken treaties and dangerous precedents. They worried about what would happen if every species decided to seek justice outside council authority. Civilization itself was at risk, they claimed. Then the Tarkesh representative rose. The Tarkesh were crystalline beings who rarely spoke in council sessions. Everyone fell silent to hear what they would say. The crystal being's voice was like music, but the words were hard as stone. The Tarkesh would not support sanctions against humanity, the representative declared. For 6 centuries, the Tarkesh had lost colony ships to pirate attacks. They had watched the council form committees and conduct investigations. They had waited for justice that never came. Now they watched humanity take 23 minutes to accomplish what the council could not do in 600 years. The chamber fell into shocked silence. Other species began speaking quietly among themselves. 7 more delegations stood to announce they would abstain from any vote to punish humanity. These were all frontier species, the ones who lived far from the safe core worlds. They understood what the council had failed to protect them from. Finally, Ambassador Kyungmin was allowed to speak. He walked slowly to the central podium. Every eye in the massive chamber watched him. He carried a data device which he connected to the chamber's display system. The screens showed the attack on New Hope in full detail. The council had seen edited versions before. Now they saw everything. Children crying as the ship broke apart. Parents burned alive trying to save their families. Mercenaries laughing as they fired into escape pods. The footage lasted 18 minutes. No one looked away. When the video ended, Kyungmin spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the entire chamber. 800 people died in that attack, he said. 312 were children. The council's response was to form an investigation committee that would take 7 years. The council offered mediation with the corporation that hired the murderers. Kyungmin asked a simple question. How many committee meetings equal the life of one child? How many years of investigation bring back a murdered family? The council talked about civilization and order. But what civilization allows children to be slaughtered and does nothing? He explained that humanity had followed the council's process. They had presented evidence. They had filed proper reports. They had waited for action. When no action came, humanity followed its own laws. Those laws say that people who murder children must face justice, not committee hearings. Kyungmin's final words were delivered with absolute certainty. Humanity respects the council's authority in trade and diplomacy, but humanity will never trust bureaucrats to protect human lives. The council can like this or not like this. The council can accept this or not accept this. But the council cannot stop this. Humanity will protect its people always by whatever means necessary. Then something unexpected happened. Someone began investigating the Hegemony Corporation that had hired the mercenaries. Financial records were requested. Bank accounts were examined. What investigators found shocked even the most cynical council members. The Hegemony Corporation had been involved in 17 similar attacks over the past decade. They hired mercenaries to eliminate competition, intimidate rivals, and clear frontier worlds for resource extraction. The New Hope was just the latest victim. Council officials had accepted bribes to ignore the evidence. The corruption ran deep. Suddenly, the conversation changed. Some council members who had condemned humanity began quietly backing away from their statements. Others demanded reforms to prevent such corruption. The Hegemony Corporation became the target of galaxy-wide anger that had previously been directed at humans. Meanwhile, military analysts reviewed the Brekor Station battle. Their reports disturbed many council members. Human weapons technology was far more advanced than anyone knew. The precision of the attack suggested extensive intelligence capabilities. The discipline of human forces indicated professional military training that went far beyond defensive needs. Defense Minister Seojin delivered a classified briefing to the Council's Security Committee. His assessment was blunt and frightening. If humanity decided to abandon galactic law completely, forcing them back into compliance would require a war. That war would cost millions of lives. It might destroy the Council itself. And based on what they had seen at Brekor Station, humanity might win. For 3 weeks, the Council debated. They proposed economic sanctions, but those would hurt Council economies more than Earth. They discussed military intervention, but key members refused to support it. They considered expelling humanity from the Council, but that would just remove any remaining constraints on human action. The Council faced an uncomfortable truth. They had no good options. Humanity had demonstrated they would act outside galactic law when that law failed their people. The Council lacked both the unity and the military strength to stop them. More importantly, many Council members secretly agreed with what humanity had done. They had lost people to pirate attacks and mercenary raids. They had waited for justice that never came. They had watched the guilty walk free while committees studied the evidence. Now someone had actually done something about it. The galaxy was shocked, but the galaxy was also changing. Humanity had forced everyone to see the difference between having laws and enforcing them, between talking about justice and actually delivering it, between being civilized and being helpless. The old galactic order was breaking apart. Something new was being born from the wreckage, and humanity, the species everyone thought they understood, stood at the center of it all. News of Brekor Station spread across frontier space like wildfire. In colony settlements on 16 different worlds, civilians who had lived under constant fear began to feel something they had not felt in generations. Hope. On the Tarkesh mining colony of Brekto 7, Administrator Hansel received a message from Captain Gion of the human merchant fleet. She offered to establish regular patrol routes through Tarkesh space. No payment required. Only cooperation and shared intelligence about pirate movements. Hansel accepted immediately. Within 3 days, 2 human warships arrived in their system. Pirates who had raided Tarkesh mining operations for decades suddenly found themselves facing weapons they could not match. 3 pirate vessels were destroyed in the first week. The rest fled and never returned. Similar arrangements spread across 3 sectors. Human ships began patrolling frontier space, protecting colonies the Council had ignored. It was not charity. The humans wanted allies and information. But to the frontier species, it felt like someone finally cared if they lived or died. The mercenary market collapsed overnight. Groups that had operated with impunity for centuries suddenly dissolved. Their members scattered and took new names. No one wanted to be the next example of human justice. Arms dealers reported that requests for contracts against human targets had dropped to 0. Warlord Hakor tried to rally the Vrock clans for revenge. He spoke of honor and blood debt.
He demanded war against humanity.
But most Vrock leaders refused. They had watched the battle recordings from Brekor Station. They understood that humanity had not attacked their species. Humanity had attacked murderers who happened to be Vrock. The message was clear across the galaxy. Prey on the weak and humanity will find you. It did not matter how far you ran or where you hid. It did not matter how many years passed. Humans remembered their dead and humans kept their promises. On Earth, public reaction was complicated. The families of New Hope victims held memorial services for their dead. Some felt closure. Others felt empty. Grief does not end just because justice was served. But they all agreed on one thing. Their loved ones had not been forgotten. Their deaths had meant something. Dr. Bowman, a famous philosopher, published an essay questioning humanity's actions. Had they sacrificed their moral authority for revenge? Had they become the monsters they claimed to fight? The essay sparked intense debate across human space. People argued in cafes and classrooms about justice and violence and the cost of both. Admiral Hyunwoo addressed these concerns in a public statement. He spoke calmly and honestly. Yes, they had used violence. Yes, they had killed people. Yes, it was a heavy burden to carry. But he stood by the decision completely. He spoke about the 47 survivors who watched their families burn while waiting for council justice that would never come. He spoke about being civilized not meaning being helpless. He spoke about how mercy has no meaning if you extend it to people who show none. The galaxy could judge humanity however it wanted. Humanity would judge itself by whether it protected its own. Public polls showed overwhelming support for the military's actions. Not because humans loved violence, because they loved their children more than they feared consequences. Intelligence Officer Yoonji found her network expanding rapidly. Species across the galaxy, impressed by human effectiveness, began quietly sharing information. She learned about corporate conspiracies, political corruption, and criminal operations that the Council either ignored or participated in. This intelligence became valuable leverage. When certain Council members voted to sanction humanity, evidence of their crimes appeared in public forums. When species threatened human trade routes, information about their government's corruption was leaked to their citizens. Humanity was not just strong militarily. They were strong informationally. And they were willing to fight on both battlefields. The Hegemony Corporation, which had hired the mercenaries, became the focus of galactic anger. Lawyer Yuna represented the New Hope survivors in lawsuits filed across 37 jurisdictions simultaneously. She did not expect to win every case. She expected to bury the corporation in legal costs and public shame. Meanwhile, human intelligence revealed the corporation's involvement in 17 other atrocities. The evidence was leaked to media outlets across the galaxy. The corporation's value collapsed. Its assets were frozen. Its executives were arrested on multiple worlds. The CEO was a human woman named Yesol. She had left Earth decades ago to make her fortune. She had betrayed her own species for profit. Now she was arrested and brought back to Earth to face trial for conspiracy to commit mass murder. Her trial became the most watched event in human history. The prosecution presented evidence of her role in hiring the mercenaries. They showed communications where she discussed eliminating the New Hope to clear the way for corporate expansion. They played recordings of her laughing about the deaths. The jury found her guilty in 47 minutes. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment with no possibility of release. She would spend the rest of her days in a cell, thinking about the 800 people she helped kill for money. The galaxy watched and learned something important. Humans would hold their own people accountable too. This was not about species loyalty. This was about right and wrong. Anyone who killed innocent people would face justice, human or alien. 6 months after Brekor Station, the galaxy looked different. Pirates operated more carefully. Mercenaries thought twice before accepting jobs. Corporations considered the consequences before ordering violence. Frontier colonies felt safer than they had in centuries. Humanity had not made the galaxy peaceful. They had made it more dangerous for predators and safer for prey. They had shown that violence against civilians would bring consequences faster than any committee could act. They had proven that being civilized meant protecting the innocent, not tolerating their murder. The ripple effects continued spreading outward. Every pirate who chose a different target, every mercenary who turned down a contract, every corporation that decided attacking competitors was too risky, every frontier family that slept without fear, all of it traced back to 23 minutes of violence at Brekor Station. The galaxy had been alerted. The galaxy was shocked. Now the galaxy was adjusting to a new reality. Humanity had declared themselves the protectors of the innocent and the hunters of the guilty. And they had the ships, the weapons, and the will to make that declaration real. 6 months after Brekor Station, representatives from 12 frontier species met on the human colony of New Terra. The meeting room was simple and functional. No grand decorations or formal ceremonies, just practical people solving practical problems. They proposed a formal alliance called the Frontier Mutual Defense Pact. The treaty was surprisingly simple. Member species would defend each other against attacks. They would share intelligence about threats. They would respond rapidly to protect civilian populations. No committees. No investigations that took years. Just action when action was needed. Humanity would provide military leadership and training. Other species would contribute resources, territory, and local knowledge. The pact would operate outside council authority, though it claimed no territory and threatened no peaceful civilization. It existed only to protect those the council had failed. Ambassador Kyungmin presented the treaty to the Galactic Council, not for approval, just as a courtesy to inform them it existed. 15 species joined in the first year. By the third year, the Frontier Alliance represented a third of the galaxy's population. The council faced a choice. They could fight this new organization and risk becoming irrelevant, or they could adapt and remain useful. Council chairperson Yoon Seo, a pragmatic Lumerian, chose adaptation. She proposed reforms that shocked many council members. The Security Response Committee would be restructured to act within days instead of years. Penalties for attacks on civilian vessels would increase dramatically. A special council enforcement fleet would be created, using tactics learned from human military doctrine. The reforms were controversial. The Vrock and 2 other species left the council in protest, but 30 species voted in favor. The council survived by acknowledging what humanity had forced them to see. Their bureaucratic approach to justice had enabled decades of violence against the weak. The reforms were not perfect. The council still moved slower than the Frontier Alliance. but they moved faster than before. And that was progress. Humanity's violence had somehow made the galaxy more peaceful by forcing the powerful to actually protect the vulnerable. The human fleet continued to expand. Admiral Hyunwoo oversaw construction of 12 new dreadnoughts and 50 escort vessels. But these ships were not just for war. They patrolled trade routes. They responded to distress calls. They trained alliance members in defensive operations. Captain Ji Yan commanded the patrol ship Sentinel. Her vessel became famous across frontier space. When pirates attacked a Tarkesh colony ship, the Sentinel arrived within hours. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Every pirate ship was destroyed. Every colonist was saved. Stories spread about the human ship that appeared when people needed help most. The galaxy began to understand something important. Human warriors were as committed to protecting the innocent as they were to punishing the guilty. The same force that destroyed the Vrock mercenaries at Brekor Station now defended colonies across 3 sectors. Violence and protection were 2 sides of the same coin. As the military situation stabilized, something unexpected happened. The galaxy became curious about humanity. Scholar Dong Yun published a study on human concepts of justice, revenge, and redemption. It became a bestseller across 27 species. Aliens wanted to understand the species that risked everything to avenge their dead. They read human literature and watched human entertainment. They studied Earth's violent history and the lessons humans claimed to have learned from it. Cultural attaché Gina found herself hosting packed seminars about human philosophy and ethics. The galaxy learned that humanity's capacity for violence came from centuries of suffering it. Humans understood war because they had fought so many. They understood cruelty because they had endured it. And they had decided collectively that certain things were unacceptable. Murdering children was at the top of that list. Not everyone celebrated the changes. Captain Taejin, who had commanded the righteous fury at Brekor Station, struggled with what he had done. The mercenaries deserved their fate. He believed that completely. But killing was still killing. Taking a life, even a guilty life, left marks on the soul. He began meeting with military psychologist Dr. Seo Hyun. She specialized in moral injury, the wounds that came from doing things that felt necessary but not good. Their sessions revealed a truth that made Taejin feel less alone. Even just violence left scars. Being right did not make it easy. Admiral Hyunwoo faced similar struggles. He stood by his decision to attack Brekor Station. He would make the same choice again, but he acknowledged the weight of sending people to kill and possibly die. Leadership meant carrying that burden so others did not have to. The human fleet was not full of warriors who gloried in battle. They were professionals who did what they believed necessary and lived with the consequences. This complexity fascinated the galaxy. Most species either celebrated violence or condemned it. Humans did both. They embraced it when needed and mourned it afterward. The Galactic Council and humanity settled into an uneasy coexistence. The Council maintained authority over trade, diplomacy, and most interspecies law. Humanity maintained its position that it would act independently when civilian lives were at stake. Neither side was happy with this arrangement. Both accepted it as workable. Ambassador Kyungmin worked with Chairperson Yoon Seo to ensure the parallel systems did not conflict unnecessarily. The Council's reformed enforcement fleet actually coordinated with human forces on anti-piracy operations. It was not friendship, but it was functional cooperation. Sometimes that was enough. Lieutenant Subin, who had run electronic warfare at Brekor Station, now trained Alliance members in advanced tactical systems. She was 28 years old and commanded respect from species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. Her students learned human doctrine, overwhelming preparation, precise execution, absolute commitment to protecting civilians. Colonel Minsok ran the Alliance Military Academy on New Terra. His Marines came from 9 different species. They trained together, fought together, and learned to trust each other. They became the most elite fighting force in the galaxy, not because they sought glory, because they understood what they protected. The next generation grew up in a galaxy transformed by what happened at Brekor Station. They learned that strength should serve a purpose beyond itself. That civilization meant protecting the weak, not ignoring their suffering. That sometimes peace required the credible threat of war. The galaxy was still dangerous. Pirates still raided. Criminals still operated. But they were fewer and more careful. The weak were less weak because someone was willing to defend them. The guilty were more afraid because justice could arrive in warships instead of committee reports. A new galactic order was emerging from the ashes of the old one. It was not perfect. It was not peaceful. But it was more just than what came before, and humanity stood at its center, showing the galaxy that being civilized did not mean being helpless. 5 years after the New Hope massacre, the galaxy gathered to remember. On New Terra, the thriving hub of the Frontier Alliance, survivors of the attack stood before a memorial wall. 800 names were carved into black stone. 312 of them belonged to children. Captain Jiho, who had commanded the New Hope during its final moments, spoke to the assembled crowd. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried permanent sadness. He talked about the 47 who survived and the 800 who did not. He talked about how their deaths were not forgotten, not dismissed, not buried in committee meetings. Representatives from 23 species attended the memorial. All were members of the Frontier Alliance. They laid flowers at the wall and spoke prayers in their own languages. The galaxy had changed because of what happened to the New Hope. Everyone present understood that. Pirates still existed in the galaxy, but they were fewer and more careful. Mercenaries still took contracts, but they thought twice before accepting jobs against civilians. The weak were less weak because humanity had decided protection mattered more than politics. Violence against the innocent had consequences now. Real consequences. Fast consequences. The Galactic Council and humanity had reached an understanding. The Council maintained authority over trade, diplomacy, and most interspecies law. Humanity maintained its independence in protecting human lives. Neither side loved this arrangement. Both accepted it as the best they could achieve. Ambassador Kyung Min, now the senior human representative to the Council, worked daily with Chairperson Yoon Seo. They coordinated on anti-piracy operations. They shared intelligence about threats. They even occasionally agreed on policy. It was not friendship, but it was functional cooperation built on mutual respect. The Council's reformed enforcement fleet actually worked now. They responded to attacks within days instead of years. They protected frontier colonies the Council had previously ignored. The reforms were not perfect, but they were real. Humanity's violence had forced the Council to become what it should have been all along. Lieutenant Subin, now promoted to commander, trained a new generation of tactical officers at the Alliance Academy. Her students came from 9 different species. She taught them human methods. How to prepare overwhelmingly. How to execute precisely. How to protect civilians absolutely. Some of her students were children when Brekor Station happened. Now they were the elite defenders of the frontier. Colonel Minseok watched his Marines graduate from the academy on New Terra. They represented 9 species, but they moved as one unit. They had learned to trust each other in combat and respect each other in peace. They were the most capable fighting force in the galaxy. Not because they loved war, because they understood what they fought to protect. In bars and boardrooms across the galaxy, people still spoke of Brekor Station. The story had become a proverb. Humans don't negotiate with murderers. It was not a threat. It was simply a fact that everyone understood. Attack human civilians and expect warships, not committee meetings. The galaxy had adjusted to this reality. New pirate groups explicitly avoided human targets in their founding charters. Mercenary contracts included clauses refusing operations against human civilians. Corporate risk assessments factored in the possibility of human retaliation. The galaxy was safer, not because everyone became peaceful, but because predators learned there were consequences. Admiral Hyunwoo had retired 2 years after Brekor Station. He lived now in a quiet house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Families of New Hope victims still visited him. Some thanked him for delivering justice. Others questioned whether violence was the right answer. He listened to both groups with equal respect and equal sadness. On his desk was a photograph of Ambassador Minha and her family, the woman whose death triggered everything that followed. Her husband Daehyun, her daughters Nari and Hana. Hyunwoo looked at their faces often. He wanted to remember that this was never about glory or power. It was about 800 people who died and a galaxy that wanted to form committees about it. Hyunwoo believed he made the right choice, but he would never celebrate it. That was the human way. Do what is necessary. Accept the burden. Teach the next generation to hope they never have to make the same choice. live with the consequences so others could live in safety. Captain Tajan had also retired. He spent his days teaching at a civilian flight school on Mars. His students were young people who wanted to see the stars. He taught them navigation and ship operations. He never talked about Brekor Station unless they asked. When they did ask, he told them the truth. He did what he believed necessary. It was not glorious. It was not easy. But it was right. Scholar Donghyun published his final work before retirement. The book was called The Human Paradox: Violence in Service of Peace. It examined how humanity could be simultaneously committed to peace and exceptionally capable of war. The book became required reading in universities across 40 systems. Donghyun's conclusion was simple. Humans don't love violence. They love their people more than they fear war. That love, expressed through protective force, had made the galaxy safer for everyone. The paradox was not that humans were peaceful warriors. The paradox was that it took a species willing to fight to teach the galaxy how to have peace. The galaxy continued its eternal dance. Commerce and diplomacy, conflict and cooperation, birth and death. But it was different now. Civilizations did not have to accept violence against their people as the price of galactic citizenship. Sometimes peace required the credible threat of war. Protecting the innocent mattered more than maintaining comfortable political arrangements. Humanity had proven something important. That being civilized meant protecting the weak, not tolerating their murder. That justice delayed beyond reason became justice denied. That sometimes the only answer to monsters was overwhelming force delivered with absolute precision. The galaxy was alerted to what humanity would do. The galaxy was shocked when they did it. Now 5 years later, the galaxy had adjusted. Humanity did not negotiate with murderers, and everyone was safer because of it. On New Terra, as the memorial service ended, a child asked her mother a question. Why did the humans do it? Why did they attack Brekor Station when the council said not to? The mother, a Tarkesh whose own family had been saved by human intervention, knelt down to her daughter's level. She chose her words carefully, because, she said, sometimes rules protect the guilty instead of the innocent. Sometimes following orders means letting children die, and humans decided that was unacceptable. The little girl thought about this. Then she asked another question. Are humans the good ones? The mother smiled sadly. Humans are the ones who protect us, she said. Good and bad are more complicated than that. But when someone wants to hurt us, the humans come, and that is enough. Across the galaxy, that conversation repeated in different languages and different contexts. Parents explained to children why the galaxy was safer now. Teachers discussed the ethics of violence in service of protection. Politicians debated the balance between order and justice. But everyone agreed on the fundamental truth. Humanity had changed the galaxy. They forced civilization to actually mean something. They showed that protecting the innocent required more than words and committees. They proved that sometimes the only answer to those who murder children is overwhelming force delivered without hesitation. The legacy of the New Hope lived on, not in the death of 800 people, but in the galaxy that emerged from their tragedy. A galaxy where the weak had protectors, where the guilty faced consequences, where being civilized meant having the strength to defend civilization. Humanity did not choose to be the galaxy's enforcers. They chose to protect their own, when no one else would. If that made the galaxy safer, they were glad. If it made them feared, they accepted it. Because fear was temporary, but dead children were forever. And humanity would never forget that truth.